What are you doing?
I'm writing.
When I get a new idea for a novel, this is how I start. I think about it for a really long time. But if you've ever had an idea for a novel, and if you clicked on this video, I'm gonna assume that you have, you've probably spent a lot of time in this stage already, and what you wanna know is, what do you do next? I'm not even talking about making a beat sheet or an outline or character sheets. None of that, we're not there yet. When I work with students in my writing workshops or book coach clients who are writing a book for the very first time, they have all of these big ideas and they're super excited about it. The motivation and enthusiasm is there, but they're overwhelmed with where to start. When you have an idea for a book and you let it run amok in your brain, it is exciting, but it's also almost frantic. You have characters running around and doing all this stuff, and this epic backstory starts to unfold, and suddenly you know what the prequel should be, and maybe you should write that book instead. And oh, the antagonist is so fascinating, and you just realized why she is the way she is. And speaking of plot twists, you know exactly what the big twist of your book is going to be, and it's going to make Fight Club look like Babysitter's Club. No shade, love you, Anne. And you can literally feel the emotional impact the scenes you haven't written yet are going to have on your readers. But when you actually sit down and try to get all of this stuff out of your head and onto a blank page, you just freeze up because how? First of all, the good news, or maybe this is bad news, this is totally normal. And it doesn't just happen the first time you try writing a book. In my experience, it happens almost every time. I think this is why no matter how much writing experience you have, how many novels you've written, for me at least, it's common to feel really attracted to all of those shiny templates or courses or writing software that promise you the ultimate organization. Like you can just plug everything from your brain straight into them and it's all going to be perfect. And look, I have used both Scrivener and the Save the Cat software, and I very much appreciate both of them. I think they're great. But when I'm first starting out with a new idea, these templates kind of overwhelm me because I feel the need to fill in every single thing. Like I'm doing it wrong if I don't write in all the character descriptions and the setting descriptions, and oh my God, you can upload pictures, etc., etc. And I don't have all of those answers yet. I don't know yet because this idea is still nebulous. It's wibbly wobbly. If those kinds of templates or writing software works for you in the beginning stages of writing a book, great. But if you clicked on this video in the first place, I'm kind of thinking maybe you experienced the how to start struggle too. So I am giving you permission not to use any of those. I'm giving you permission to be messy. In fact, I encourage it. The daydreaming phase of writing a book is really, truly important. As writers, we often get really caught up with word counts because words are quantifiable and we can easily use them to gauge our success. As in, I wrote a lot of words today and it was a successful day. Or I didn't write any words today, so it was not a successful day. But the truth is, you don't need to be writing to be working on your book, and that is never more true than in the very, very beginning brainstorming phase. In fact, I would say that if you start writing your draft immediately upon getting the idea, it's kind of like pouring hot water over coffee grounds and drinking it immediately. Seriously, don't beat yourself up if you're not racking up thousands of words in a document every day at this point. It's okay. Now, when I hit the point where I've been thinking about it long enough and I'm totally consumed with the idea and I know I want to write it, but I'm still not ready to actually sit down and start working on it yet, what I do is I start telling my writer friends about my idea in the hopes that they will validate my genius. But that's not how it usually goes. Yeah, it's about this girl who thinks she's an octopus, but with magic powers, and her cousin owns a salon for cowboys and, yeah, an octopus. No, she can walk. It's just, no, it's like a metaphor. To be fair, this has nothing to do with the way my friends react. It has everything to do with me. If I start saying this idea out loud to someone else too soon, I start to second guess it, and I start to doubt myself, and I start to think, oh, this isn't brilliant, this is actually ridiculous. And I think this isn't true for everyone. This is going to be different, not just from writer to writer, but from book to book. So proceed with caution. If you feel like maybe describing your idea to someone else is going to cause all of that self-doubt to creep in, just keep it to yourself and let it simmer for a little while longer. Especially because the other thing with telling people in your life that you're writing a book, especially if you're writing a book for the first time, is that, again, to be supportive, they're gonna check in with you about it. Hey, how's your book coming?
Fine. How many words have you written?
I said fine. As important as the daydreaming phase is, it's entirely possible to stay in it for too long. At some point, you have to start. So, where do you start? You start with a hammer and pick. What? One of my favorite videos on YouTube is the making of a marble statue. When I see a statue or a sculpture in a museum, I can't fathom how the artist accomplished it. Much the same way I think a lot of writers hold a published novel in their hands and think, how do I get to this? How do I take a block of marble and turn it into something so beautiful and detailed and real? Well, it starts with a hammer and pick. The sculptor roughs out the block first. This is you finding the shape of your story. At first, it's not going to resemble what's in your head. This is the point where most people who start writing a novel give up. Don't. You're just finding the general shape of it. You're making a bit of a mess in the process, and that's okay. That's how it's supposed to be. You could go about this several different ways, and a lot of it is going to depend on how this idea came to you in the first place. Maybe you had an idea for a character, a specific personality type, or someone with a certain ability, and you wanted to just throw them into a scenario and see what they did. Maybe you came up with a magic system or some fantasy world, and you just want to explore it, but you don't know who the character is yet. Maybe you just asked a really good what-if question and you want to try to answer it. These are all common ways to get an idea for a book and really great starting points. So at this hammer and pick stage, you're going to get messy and you're going to spend some time trying to uncover three things. First, your main character or your cast of characters if you're doing a multi-POV book, and how they change, how they transform, again, very generally from the beginning of the book to the end of the book. Your setting, and this isn't just for fantasy and sci-fi, world building is important no matter what genre you're writing in. And your plot. I am not saying you have to plot out your book. I know this puts a lot of people off. You really don't have to do it, but it can be really helpful at this early stage to give yourself at least a couple of goalposts, scenes that you see that you know you want to hit, and maybe you're not sure where they happen in the story, but write them down, and then you can kind of work on finding your way to them. Remember, none of this needs to be set in stone, pun intended. You can always change it. Stay flexible, but write this stuff down. When I'm ready to start working on an idea, I write the back cover copy. Even though I know that in the event this book is eventually published, that description will probably change, just having that pitch at the beginning gets me excited and motivated, and it's something I can look at later when I'm writing the draft to kind of help keep me on the right course. A really good book description includes a compelling character with a want and a need and conflict and stakes, and don't forget the setting, and yes, you can totally fit all of that in a few paragraphs. I've got a course on writing book descriptions step by step up on Skillshare. If you're interested, the link is in the description. So my hammer and pick is to go for the description, the big picture summary of the story. And alongside that, I will have one Word document where I ramble out all of my thoughts on those things, the characters, the plot, and the setting. It is not organized. It is not pretty. It might even be nonsensical in places, but that's okay. It's the excess marble you have to hammer away at if you're going to find the shape of the statue. The next step for the sculptor is a tooth or claw chisel to model the form and chip away more stone. Contours of the form of the statue are refined with increasingly fine chisels. You're narrowing in on the idea. It's still messy. It's still imperfect. For me, this is in the form of beat sheets, which I develop into bigger outlines. I love outlining. For me, outlining is the most creative part of the writing process. It's where I let my ideas run wild. My outlines change a lot. Sometimes in the middle of writing a draft, I'll go back to the outline and make some adjustments. I try to keep them very flexible, but even then, for some writers, outlines just feel too restrictive, and that's valid. It might not be for you. You might want to just try writing the first scene, the first chapter of your book, and see where it takes you. No matter what you do, the important thing to remember is that right now you're still using pretty big chisels. You are not writing the final version of the book that you will one day see on the shelves at bookstores. Don't trick yourself into thinking that's what you're doing. What you're doing right now is going to result in a pretty clunky first draft, but you are going to start to see the shape of something incredible in there. Celebrate this step of the process. As the sculptor continues to work, he uses finer and finer tools and chisels, working on the most minute details last. Consider the big picture of your story first and foremost, and worry about more scene level and then sentence level stuff later. If we're going to take this analogy all the way to the end, I would say that the final piece, the statue being sanded and shined smooth using sandpaper, is the equivalent of line edits or copy edits. Now imagine the sculptor tried taking that sandpaper to the hunk of marble he had at the beginning and just focused on getting the marble shiny and smooth. That would be kind of pointless, right? Because eventually he's gonna have to pick up that hammer and start chunking away at it. I am not saying you shouldn't try to write beautiful prose on your first draft. I'm saying you should experiment with your prose. And experimenting means, yes, sometimes you are going to find some truly beautiful gems, and other times, most of the time, you are going to write some duds. You gotta accept that. Otherwise, you are just standing in front of your hunk of marble with your sandpaper and you're scrubbing away at it, and that statue, it's never gonna come out. So after all that, if you're still thinking, okay, I get it, cool, but how do I start? Start with one new small habit. Everyone's writing process is different, and honestly, you're probably going to find your process changes from book to book. I know mine does. So I am not trying to give you the perfect template that you can apply to your life and write to your book, because that template does not exist. What you need to do is to start setting writer habits and start setting writer goals. And the best way to do that is to keep it small and simple at first. One new habit, something you know you can do. You might have heard the old saying, write every day. It is BS. You do not have to write every day to be a writer. You are more than welcome to write every day if you want to, but don't feel like a day that goes without writing is a failure. You might want to make writing every other day a habit, a 3 times a week habit, a weekend habit, whatever fits your schedule. Maybe you do it when you first wake up in the morning, maybe it's something you do on your lunch break, maybe it's right before bed. Set a word count or a time goal, like write for 10 minutes or write 5 sentences. Something you know without a doubt you can accomplish and maybe even surpass. Once you feel comfortable with this and it is actually a habit in your life, start to develop it. Write a little bit longer or a little bit more. The snowball effect here is real. This is how you get motivated and stay motivated. Even a seemingly small success like I wrote 100 words on my lunch break today, that victory sparks the motivation you need to do it again the next day and the day after that. So what exactly are you writing? Are you jumping into the first draft? Are you outlining? Are you filling out character sheets? Do you have some kind of cool world building software and you're developing like a wiki for your world? Sure. As long as you start with a hammer and pick and embrace the mess you're making in the beginning, those are all great ways to start writing a book. You just have to start. So go start.